All right, today we're talking about the movie Burning by Chang-Dong. It's based on the book Barn Burning by Haruki Murakami. Is that right? That's all right? That's all right. All right, we're nailing this today. We're off to a great start.
I don't know what to say.
Burning is a film that came out this year. It's just playing at the Loft right now, and it's kind of making its world release. It's the South Korean nominee for the 91st Academy Awards. Follows three characters: Jung-soo, Hee-mi, and Ben. I can remember Ben, it's pretty easy. It's a relatively simple film from its premise. Jung-soo is reconnected with Hee-mi. They've known each other since they were very young in this small village in Korea, and they reunite and become friends again. And it becomes pretty quickly apparent that their treatment of each other as kids kind of led to a lot of disconnect with Hee-mi, where she's gone through plastic surgery and changed herself a lot, and by the time that they reconnect, she's kind of left without a sense of identity, and she's out wandering the world. She's about to travel to Africa for a few months to try to find herself, at which point they enter into a romantic relationship. And then once Hee-mi leaves, Jung-soo is left to feed her cat for a few months and long for her and think about her. All while he's dealing with his own drama at home. His father is under trial for a violent act he committed, so he's kind of watching over the family farm. He's kind of a caretaker type character. When Hee-mi finally returns from Africa, she returns with a character named Ben. And it becomes quickly apparent that there's something wrong with Ben. Jung-soo quickly realizes that whatever happened over in Kenya, Hee-mi and Ben are now sort of connected. And Ben is your prototypical movie psychopath. He's a very affluent, very intelligent, very good-looking, well-dressed character. And this leads to sort of an awkward love triangle. The difference is that while Jung-soo is infatuated with Hee-mi, Hee-mi doesn't necessarily seem to realize that he exists or that he exists in a romantic capacity. And while she is infatuated with Ben, it doesn't seem as if there's really any kind of a romantic connection there. And it all kind of culminates at a point in the middle of the film where Ben and Hee-mi go to Jung-soo's farm out in this very small town where Hee-mi also grew up. And after a marijuana-fueled party, Hee-mi's passed out. Ben and Jung-soo are sitting outside, and Ben confesses to Jung-soo, who is a writer, who's been trying to figure out what story he wants to write and tell, that he should tell his story. And Ben's story is one of a man who every 2 months feels compelled to go out and find an abandoned greenhouse and burn it to the ground. The rest of the film really revolves around Jung-soo attempting to locate the greenhouse in the area where he thinks Ben is going to commit his next action, and in a way kind of contain the chaotic nature of Ben's character. And that's kind of where I want to abandon the plot synopsis to stay out of spoilers, but it's a really good jumping off point into the nature of the film. And really what the film is exploring is the nature of these three people as individuals. And it tries to really humanize all of them. You've got Jung-soo, who's kind of a sad, quiet, but competent individual who's always seeking for something. In his case, he's seeking for what story he wants to write. He's someone who's been kind of wandering. They exposit pretty early in the film that he joined the military, he's educated, and still he came back to his family farm to kind of pick up the pieces left behind by his father. Clearly he has a sense of loss and a sense of need, and he's trying to find human connection. Hee-mi, meanwhile, is a character who talks a lot about the concepts of what she calls little hungry and big hungry. And these are concepts that she picked up during her Wanderlust trip to Africa, and she's kind of exploring the continent and seeking to find herself. And she's always talking about these tribal music and dance routines she saw, and how, you know, little hungry is about people who are physically hungry, people who need to eat. Big hungry is the search for meaning in life. It's the search for belonging. It's sort of a metaphysical hunger, which is really befitting of the character. In some ways, it's befitting of all of these characters, but most specifically her. She's someone who really doesn't seem to have a focus in life, a goal in life, a plan for her life. She is a burning, you see what I'm saying there? An ember wafting in the air. Where she ends up, well, that's kind of what the film is exploring. She is the character with the most kind of chaotic aspect to her. And Ben, meanwhile, is someone who it seems like is just searching for meaning. He's very disassociated from the world around him. He says very early on, I find people who cry very strange because I've never cried, which to me just indicated that he was a psychopath, and probably not a completely off-base interpretation of the character, but nonetheless, he's still going out and trying to conduct these actions while not necessarily seeing any meaning behind them, although he tries to justify them in this weird pseudo-philosophy. So you've got these three characters who are very ungrounded, who are tethered together through Hee-mi, and at the end of the day, they all just have completely different motivations. For Jung-soo, it's love. For Himi, it's finding meaning. And for Ben, you get the idea that meaning is something that he abandoned a long time ago. He's somebody who's just going through life and everything is a game. And those three characters combined lead to very interesting storytelling experiences. Part of why the film is so impactful is that the directing allows scenes to unfold over progressive periods of time. There are a lot of beautiful long shots. The film is paced in such a way where at about 2 hours and 20 minutes, it does feel a bit long, but it plays out very much like a novel. It feels like they kind of front end the story in the first act. The second act is more about establishing the risks and the goals and the fear and the concern. And the third act is all about resolution. And in some ways, like a novel, the third act feels more like an epilogue than it really does a conclusion. So it kind of bucks a lot of storytelling conventions from film and is very effective in doing that. But part of that, again, goes back to allowing scenes to play out. There are 2 or 3 scenes that go on for at least 3 minutes of single camera shots that focus on each of the characters separately. What it really allows for are little moments just with these characters where even if they're with other people, you are really isolating them by themselves, getting into their heads, and just kind of allowing for that moment in a play where you just imagine the house lights going down and a spotlight hitting that one character, and everything that they do is intractable to their character and who they are, and the story that's being conveyed through them. In a weird way, you've got 3 stories kind of going on in parallel that lead to a much bigger overarching narrative. The film is also beautiful in a number of ways. The use of color is fantastic, and the absence of sound, the absence of music, the absence of anything other than things that are coming from a character, whether it's dialogue or the beat of their heart, or what is constantly referred to, which is this feeling, the feeling of this burning that is this bass that rattles in the bones. And from my recollection, the only music that you hear is kind of the same refrain of bass and a really subtle music tone that kind of really speaks more to psychology than it speaks to aesthetics. And that's very effective in this movie. Some of the best shots in the movie are just gorgeous visuals with no audio whatsoever. No talking, no crickets, no music, nothing, but just absolutely captivating and hypnotic cinema. It is truly one of the most gorgeous films that I've seen all year. And there's another aspect to the characterization of this film that works really well. And I think that it's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, and that's just the choice of wardrobe. How you can really distinguish a character like Jung-soo, who is a poorer person, who really doesn't seem to take a lot of pride in his appearance, who is just kind of wandering through life and trying to find meaning and trying to associate with these characters. And he's dressed that way. He's dressed down for most scenes. Even when he's kind of feeling outshone by Ben, he never really attempts to meet that same standard. Whereas Ben is constantly dressed up, Ben is constantly fashion forward, and Himi goes from when she's poorer and she's kind of more soft-spoken to when she's with Ben and trying to kind of fit into his aesthetic. And there are little moments of authenticity that just lend itself to a great watching experience. And it's gonna sound incredibly stupid to anybody who's watching in Korea, for instance, but the moment where they have a conversation about how Jung-soo lives so close to the North Korean border and he can hear the North Korean propaganda coming over the PAs, and just realizing that you are so implanted in this other culture, I mean, it's really seamless. You don't really feel any culture shock. And part of that goes back to the humanity of the characters. You really do feel like you're implanted and embedded with them and watching them go throughout their life. And the film is endlessly philosophical. I mean, like I said, I think each character kind of embodies their own life vision, their own philosophy on how to live. And really, it goes back to Saoirse, right? I mean, hell is other people and how to rectify simultaneous existence, which is a concept that comes out a lot. And really, what happens when you've got 3 characters experiencing great hunger, but only one can really feast in the end. And the biggest thing that I'll say to kind of wrap up the thematics about this and characters being human and characters being allowed to be themselves is that there are a lot of scenes following these characters where you feel like they're dumb, or you feel like they're pathetic, or you feel like they're transparent. And you almost kind of feel like you're the only person in the room with them experiencing that. And that to me is what it is to be human in a sense. I mean, it's seeing not just, you know, the highlights of a person's life. And anybody could make a film showing Babe Ruth hitting home runs, right? But it's, you know, him drunk in a dumpster eating hot dogs. That's really who that person was as a human being. And while sad and uncomfortable, it's kind of what you want to see if you're actually trying to be genuine about a character study. And this film is a character study through and through. There are some downsides to it. Playing out longer and coming from a novel, or a short story in this case, it did feel like there were some subplots that maybe didn't need to be there. There's one subplot in particular that once you see it, you'll kind of know. It plays out periodically throughout the entire film, and it's resolved near the end. But it really feels like it's only there to give you one piece of information that leads you to the conclusion. And so it felt like it could have been handled maybe in a way that took up less time and that maybe just didn't have so much prominence and kind of just distract from the film. Because for the most part, it's a three-person show. Even when you're dealing with Jung-Soo's father and his lawyer and all of those dramas, it really just feels like a film where you are like a third-person video game. You're right behind their head all day, and you're experiencing those interactions from one of those three perspectives. And they are such strong characters and so well acted that any time that it kind of deviates from that, it does feel slower and it does feel kind of like you're being pulled out of what's going on. Who should see this film? I mean, I would compare it to, it kind of had the same thematics of like Insomnia by Christopher Nolan, where it just feels like it's a character who's kind of losing it and feels like he's experiencing his own mystery while the world's falling apart around him. It does feel a little bit like Paul Thomas Anderson in the sense that you're given these three characters who really aren't being shown as good or bad people, but just humans in their own right, with a lot of long flowing sequences that allow those characters to behave naturally. If you like mysteries, if you like character studies, and you're really interested in a film that transports you to a different place and asks you to kind of get to know these three characters and figure out what makes them tick, and at the end of the day, what is that burning? Is it the physical burning of the greenhouse, or is it that burning from inside of you, and is it that desire that can never be quenched? That to me is what made this film so interesting. So if that sounds interesting, I would definitely check it out. If you get really anxious in your chair, kind of waiting for a plot to progress, if you get uncomfortable kind of just sitting around and watching a character for a few minutes, just go through their routine and kind of wondering where it's going, what's going on, what the relevance are to their actions, it can be a little bit challenging in that sense. It can make you kind of check your watch or feel like you're waiting for it to wrap up. There were points probably in the third act where I was wishing things would wrap up. Like we had almost those moments where it felt like a false kind of ending and you were wondering how exactly it was going to be wrapped up. But for me, and I think I've said it a few times in recent reviews, once we reached the climax, it really felt gratifying in that sense. So if you can hold on to the ride, it's absolutely worth it. So Burning was playing at the Loft. It's playing, I think, for the next week or so, and it should be getting a much wider release as Academy Awards season rolls around. And I think it should be a pretty significant contender for Best Foreign Language Film. I thought it was fantastic. 3 amazing performances in one movie, and a very tight script that plays out like a novel would over a nice, progressive, very slow and intentional burn. See what I'm doing right there?
Yeah.
See you like that?
I see what
You like that? You like that? You like that?